Hello again. We are going to paint in our cone. In the last video, we went over how to do the drawing of the cone. Now I'm ready to paint. So to be ready, I need to have a couple things. I need to have my drawing of a cone. I have a picture here for you to look at. I'll put this up on the class site too, just so you have something to look at. It really helps me to have an image in order to figure out where I want to put my highlights and my shadows. So I have this next to me. You don't need to do that, but please either be looking at this video or looking at the image on the Canvas page. All right, I have some clean water, clean palette, I have my brushes, I have a paper towel on my rag, I have my little under painting paper, it's nice and dry. This is what I put under when I get to those edges so I don't paint on my table. And my colors. So I've decided I'm going to do green. I am using the store-bought green. I told you if you have a green in your kit, some years you do, some years you don't. I told you not to use this on the other assignments. You can use it on this one. This is not a color mixing assignment, it's a value assignment about the light and the dark. So I don't mind if you want to use a store-bought green. That's what my grandma would call it. She would say a boughten green. I'm also going to need black and white. And the first thing I'm going to do is put a little bit of paint in my palette, whatever my primary color is, and some black and white. You may just do black and white. If you don't want to mess around with a color, that's fine. I'm going to do green like I said, but you can just do black and white if that's what sounds good to you. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to think about where I want my values to be. So I can see that there's a bright stripe of white. Where do you think your light is coming from based on this? Chances are you said it's coming from the left, right? That's where our light is striking the side of our object. This is going to be our highlight. On the other side, opposite where the light is our darkest part. This is going to be our core shadow. So we're going to have our lightest here, our core shadow here. There's a little bit of light reflecting on the edge there. That's often called a catch light. And then everything else is going to be our mid-tone. So if you're like me, you like to plan ahead a little bit. I have a pencil and a ruler nearby. I didn't tell you to have these with you, but they're helpful. I might lightly sketch in where I want that highlight to be. So so lightly, because I don't want it to show through. I'm just going to do 2 lines, both of which come out from the top of my cone, that are just going to say, hey, don't forget to put my highlight here. The reason I do this is sometimes people will make them kind of parallel, but you want to make sure that your lines come to a point at the top of your cone. So that's why I do these little guidelines there, just so I remember to make it like a triangle shape. Same thing with my core shadow. Lightly, ever so lightly, get that core shadow general shape in. Now that doesn't mean I won't change it. I just want to remember dark goes here, light goes here, and they're both those wedge shapes. All right, I'm going to take my kneaded eraser and I'm going to lighten those lines so I can still see them, but again, I don't want them to really show through my paint. So here we go, nice and light. Okay, I don't know if you can see in the video. They're there, just very light. Okay, time to start mixing our paint. So let's see, I've got my mid-tone, which will be this green, and then I'm gonna mix up some of my highlight, and I'm gonna mix up some of my core shadow, so they're ready to go. So let's start with a lot of white and a little bit of green. Just get some of those lighter greens ready. Wow, that's really minty. That's maybe more minty than I'm in the mood for. Let's throw some yellow in there, just for fun. Sometimes you're in the mood for a certain color. That was just a little too sweet for me. I'll add a little bit of yellow. And I'll make maybe a slightly darker version, just so I have some pre-mixed values. The thing about acrylic is it goes really quickly. it dries really quick. So you have to, gotta move fast. So it just will help me be ahead of the game a little to have some of these made. Okay, same thing on the other side. I'll take my green, a little bit of that yellow so it's not so sweet. That canned green is really, really sweet. And then I'll have some darker colors. And I might end up needing to mix more, that's okay. I just want to have some prepared. Okay, let's get our mid-tone painted. So whatever I want the main color to be, I'll make it this green. So I'm just gonna paint in my mid-tone. Here I go. Then I'm going to transition into this lighter value right here. Do a little stripe of that, and maybe a little stripe of it on the other side. And I might take my brush while it still has paint in it and try to blend that edge a little bit. Okay, now while the paint is still wet, I'm going to come into the center part where I had my lightest value. Oops, I used it already. Oops. So I'll make a new lightest value. Do that center part. Trying to keep that wedge shape. Not worrying too much about making a clean edge on my bottom of my cone, because I'm going to paint the table and I can clean it up then. Sometimes I can even take a clean dry brush and pull it over the paint, and that will blend it together. Okay, so I went from dark to medium to light to medium. Let's go back into our mid-tone, which was this guy. So I'll just transition back into our regular green. Keeping a wedge shape. Maybe taking my dry brush, blending that edge. Okay. And then I'm going to start heading into my darker color. So I'm going to add a little a darker color here in that wedge shape. And then into my core shadow. So I mixed up that dark color. I added black to my green here. Let's go ahead and get some of that down. Kind of working side to side, so I'm always up against another color when it's still wet. Trying to avoid some dry edges. And I'll just fill that triangle shape. Making sure that it stays a triangle shape, and then maybe taking that brush and blending the edges, so just going up and down with it so it smooths out that edge. If it starts to stick there, I can clean my brush and go back to the color before, go back to that green and kind of blend that edge. Go back to the color before, blend that edge. Oops, that got a little light. Okay, so it comes out of that core shadow and into my main color again, my mid-tone. And I see a little highlight on that edge, so I'm going to grab my highlight color, just put that in. All right, again, don't worry if that edge is a little sloppy, because once this dries, we'll put in the background. Okay, so I let this dry so I can go in here and not have it blend with my cone. I'm gonna do the background up here, and I'm gonna do this here, and then I'm also gonna do a shadow. So first things first, I'm gonna sketch in kind of where my shadow is going to be. If my light is coming from this side, then my shadow is gonna kind of come out to the back. The shadow is going to connect to the edges of the cone. So I can imagine a line coming from this edge of the cone, maybe stretching back that way, right? If our light's going this way, our shadow's going this way, and then a line coming from that edge of the cone. So like that. You could have it slant a little more this way if you wanted, maybe off the page, as if it's like a low light. Maybe I'll do that. So if the light is a little bit lower, I could envision it coming from that corner and kind of going off the page. It's a little more dramatic. Let's do that. Nice. All right, basic thing you need to know, opposite direction of the light, and it goes from this corner and that corner, and they will meet. Okay, so for the background, I can do whatever color I would like. I'm feeling kind of a bluey here, maybe a red here, I don't know. I could do it all greens if I wanted to keep it that way. It's really up to me. Maybe I'll do a red here and then a blue there. So I'm gonna start with my background color. If I want it to be red, I can do it a flat color. I could have it slowly change to another color. almost out of yellow, but maybe I want red to turn a little yellowy. This part is pretty much up to you, and I won't show you how to do the whole thing because it's pretty simple, but I'm gonna paint this a color that I want, and then I'm gonna make sure to talk to you about doing that shadow. All right, I'll put my protective paper behind, and I like a flat brush to help me get a nice flat edge. I did not do a great job of cleaning this brush last time, and so I'm suffering the consequences because it's a little stiff. So I'm gonna try to give it a nice clean, and then I can see if it's clean on my paper towel. It's actually pretty good. Okay, grab a color, start with red, maybe throw in a little bit of yellow, and then using that straight edge, I can plant my hand like we talked about, and I can kind of drag it. Notice how I start back from the edge a little bit. That's kind of my warm-up. Just want to make sure that there's not too much paint on my brush and that I've got a sense of control. And when I feel like I've got it, I can just drag that line. Oh, that red looks good against that green. Drag it, smooth and consistent. Go slow, take your time. I can rush over here where there's nothing at risk, right? But when I'm going up against my object, my cone, that's when you want to really take your time. You don't want to have to go back in and add more green. I could if I needed to, but take your time on the delicate part, and then you can go a little bit faster on the rest of it. Oh, I went in on my cone. That's okay. This is a good opportunity to show you I could just let it be, or I could let it dry and put more green over it. I think I'm just gonna let it be. It's not the end of the world, so don't feel too bad if it happens to you, but I should have taken my time. Oh no. All right, so I'm gonna fill this in real quick, and then we'll look at the table surface. All right, I'm gonna pop in here real quick with a clean, damp brush and show you how you can erase paint. So I've got a brush, it's clean, it's damp, which means I got some water on it, and then I dried it off mostly. Sometimes you can go in and lift off paint. So I'm just going to see if I can rescue that edge real quick. Some people wouldn't care and they'd say, no, I'm just gonna leave it, but it's nice to know how to do this technique if you need to. Kind of like erasing. Sometimes the paint gets dry, and that's when it says, nope, I'm not gonna do what you want. I will not comply. But if it's still kind of damp, it's pretty easy to get off. All right, I feel better about that. Continue with the background, carry on. One thing I'm sure you've noticed is that I turn my paper a lot. I want to make sure I'm making it easy on my hand. Our hands work better in certain directions. We kind of have a pivot there on our wrist. So I want to set it up to be easy for myself. So if it starts to feel awkward or I don't have enough control moving one way, then I'll rotate my paper. Another thing maybe you noticed is I keep wiping off my brush. There were some goobers in my brush from not having cleaned it well before, and they were showing up in my paint. So when I see a goober on there, I just get it and I wipe it on my paper towel. Okie dokie. What color should I do for that table? What color, I ask you? I thought blue. Maybe I'll do blue with a little purple. Sounds like a plan to me. You can do whatever you would like, whatever sounds good to you. And get my brush nice and clean. I can flip my paper towel over or get a new one if I need to. I'm going to paint this section, and I might make it a little bit lighter at the top because that will help to separate it from the background, and then I'll let it get a little bit darker towards the bottom. So maybe I'll grab my blue, a little bit of white, and I'll start with a lighter value up at the top. Right, here we go. Remember, taking my time near the things that are important, like this edge and the side of the cone, planting my hand and just kind of dragging it along. Might take a couple times till I get a nice clean edge. Take your time. And then right there in that corner, this big old brush isn't going to get in there the way I want it to. So I'm going to have to grab a different brush and steal some of my paint and sneak in there to get that little corner there. Otherwise, if I try to use this big clunky brush, it's great for a lot of things, but it's not great for corners. So a little guy with a point, I can sneak that point in there, sneak, sneak, sneak. Get that corner. And then when I'm ready to run free, I can use this big guy. That's why it pays to have lots of different brushes for different things. All right, let's get this filled in. Okay, notice that I'm leaving the shadow blank. We'll come back to it, but for now, go ahead and leave that blank and just do the rest of your cone. Okay, so we still want to do our shadow here. And there's a famous quote by Leonardo da Vinci that says, "Shadows are a color of a lesser light," which when I hear that, I think lesser light. Okay, what is lesser light? Lesser light just means less light, which is kind of a funny way of saying more dark. So shadows are a color, he says. Notice he didn't say shadows are gray, shadows are black. He said shadows are a color of a lesser light. So that means that shadows are a darker version of a color. And you can test this. You can see this in the world around you. If you were to take your hand, like for example, I'm putting it over this red paper, making a shadow, what color is the paper under my hand? It's darker red. If I put it on the green, it doesn't change to black, it's just a darker green. So shadows are a darker version of the color. So in this situation, when I put my hand on that blue, or when I have a cone on that blue, it's going to cast a shadow that is just a darker blue. Just a darker blue. So I'm going to take my black, and instead of just going, black shadow, I'm going to mix it with some blue, and we're going to come up with a darker blue. Now, there's another quote I want you to think of. I don't know who said this one. I'll get back to you on it. It says, "Shadows are darkest at their point of origin." Now, point of origin is just a fancy way of saying where they start. So shadows are darkest where they start. So if I'm looking at this cube, where does it start? Or the shadow, excuse me. It starts up against that cube, right? It kind of fades out as it goes away. So I'm going to make my shadow color darkest where it starts. Darkest where it starts. And then as it starts to move away from the object, away from its point of origin, it's going to get lighter and lighter. So let's make it dark right here. I'm gonna need my little detail brush there. I'm gonna sneak in there, get that edge. There it is. And then as it moves away, it's going to become lighter and lighter. So in this case, more and more of a regular blue. It's gonna start out pretty dark and it's gonna get bluer as it moves away. Boy, that's a beautiful color. There it is. Mine stayed pretty dark, so I might go in on that edge and try to lighten it. Or I could go in on this edge and darken it. It should be darker where it starts and get lighter as it moves away. Okay. I could add texture there if I wanted. I could go back in and add another white highlight, you know, play around with it, make sure that you like it. I'm gonna let it dry. While it's drying, I will wash my brushes, wash my palette. When it's dry, I'll roll some tape underneath it so that the edges aren't curled, and then I'll take a nice quality photo and turn it in. All right, thanks for hanging out. Hope you had fun drawing a cone.